The oil war keeps accelerating, as we are now witnessing the advent of dueling blockades, with an A, not an E, because they are mutually coexisting rather than fighting one another. Plus, Russia has developed a counter-strategy that raises more questions than answers. Oh, and all of this is taking place in the shadow of a major primetime address by Trump, scheduled for tonight. Let's start with Ukraine, though, because Kyiv made the first formal declaration here. After having targeted multiple tankers on the Black Sea, never mind one somehow off the coast of Senegal, Ukraine announced on Saturday that it was placing sanctions on 700 Russian Shadow Fleet vessels. What that meant in practice was questionable. Ukraine does not play a pivotal role in the international economic system, so it cannot simply freeze the assets of the associated businesses and countries involved in the trade. Nor does Ukraine have a globalized navy to impose true blockades to stop the ships. Technically, Ukraine does not even have a navy at all, despite having won the Battle of the Black Sea. Those points stand in contrast to the United States, where Trump formally entered the blockade game late Tuesday night. Here is the announcement straight from his Truth Social post. It is long, so I will limit this to the highlights. Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. It will only get bigger, and the shock to them will be like nothing they have ever seen before, until such time as they return to the United States of America all of the oil, land, and other assets that they previously stole from us. Therefore, today, I am ordering a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Blockades are usually interpreted as acts of war. So, at least by that measure, the US-Venezuelan war started on December 16th, 2025. Or maybe we can post-date it to the seizure of the Skipper, the first action of what became a blockade, on December 10th. Then again, my academic alter ego would like to remind you that we need 1,000 fatalities before we start considering things a war. But no one asked him about that, now did they? So whatever you want to give as the start date, and whether you want to call it a war or a militarized interstate dispute, we now have dueling blockades. And there is a nice contrast between one being conducted by a weak country against a strong country, and another being conducted by the strongest country in the world against a frail country. So let's spend a few moments discussing how each of these may play out. For Ukraine, the sanctions announcement did not much change the broader war situation. It was more of a rallying call than anything. Ukraine has been knee-deep in targeting Russia's energy infrastructure since August, and after speed-running through the entire timeline, I should note the latest additions. Word that Ukraine struck oil rigs again in the Caspian Sea. But as for the blockade, the more interesting twist was the Kremlin announcing that it would provide military escorts for its Shadow Fleet tankers. A few points on how to interpret this. 1. Estimates of the number of tankers in the Shadow Fleet range from the high hundreds to a little bit over 1,000. The Russian Navy simply does not have enough vessels to follow all of them, especially as they tend to be traveling all the way to East Asia. That is a major problem when somehow Ukraine can strike vessels near Senegal. It seems that nowhere is safe. 2. I am not sure that the military escorts will do anything other than provide Ukraine with a fresh batch of easy-to-locate targets, and ones that will not cause as much political anger among third-party countries. Remember, Ukraine's sea drones have effectively won the Battle of the Black Sea, as Russia retreated its navy to eastern ports to avoid losing that entire fleet. Even that is not working so well, though. Ukraine attacked a submarine, valued at $400 million, sitting in harbor east of the Kerch Strait on December 15th. Also note Ukraine's casual flex of releasing Russia's security video of the attack. Point is, the naval escorts may provide some level of protection. But if it was a good idea to withdraw from active operations previously, then it cannot be a great idea to turn them into escorts. The most that it can be is the best of a bunch of bad alternatives. Third, and this part tends to be overlooked, Russia appears to be limiting the escorts to the Baltic Sea. No doubt this is still partially a response to Ukraine, especially given that Ukraine is fully capable of conducting special operations out there. However, I mostly interpret this as a signal to Europe. Hey Europe, I know that you are watching a blockade in South America and another in Southeastern Europe. Do not get any ideas about replicating it in Northern Europe, lest you have to deal with our Navy. I am not entirely sure that Europe or NATO countries find Russia's Navy particularly threatening, but they would still prefer to avoid a conflict. Either way, it will make the Baltic a more interesting front in the meantime. Now let's turn our attention to Venezuela, because Trump has certainly been turning his attention over to there the past week. Assuming that the United States follows through on the threat to blockade Venezuela, then the entire country is about to be in a state of economic crisis. And for those of you thinking about the intersection between Trump's reputation and Mexican entrees, note that the United States has already done the hard part here by sending an armada to the region capable of enforcing the blockade, or as Trump calls it, armada with a capital A. At this point, actually seizing vessels is easy, because they are not in the business of defense. They are in the business of commerce. That is how the United States captured the skipper with practically no resistance. The only real obstacle, in theory, would be Venezuela's navy. Except Venezuela's navy is geared toward coastal patrols. It only has one frigate, which is from the 1980s and in disrepair. Put differently, the naval battle would be over in a day or two if it came to that. Consequently, Venezuela would need help from abroad if it would hope to militarily end the blockade. Russia would be the starting point because it has plenty of interests in Venezuela. For example, it will be hurt by the blockade. Soon, or now, it can no longer sell to Venezuela naphtha, an oil product that is critical to help make the country's heavy oil into something usable. One problem. We just discussed how Russia's navy is too preoccupied elsewhere in the world to be a contributor there, never mind the potential consequences of engaging with the United States. China also seems completely disinterested in assisting with the situation, despite the two countries nominally being in the counter-West coalition. So, the military situation is bad for Venezuela. Is the economic situation any better? Well, no. It is worse. The oil industry accounts for about a sixth of Venezuela's overall economy, and that will come to a complete halt afterward. For a GDP comparison, it would be like if you told everyone in California and Georgia tomorrow that they were out of a job. You cannot do that without causing massive ripple effects to the rest of the economy. Get ready for a depression. However, it gets worse for the Venezuelan government. About 4/7 of its budget comes from receipts and taxes from the oil industry. In other words, the government is about to become insolvent. We could spend all day covering every major effect of the Venezuelan government no longer being able to pay its bills. But I want to highlight two things to watch as this plays out. 1. Venezuelan soldiers do not do their jobs for fun. Most of them are volunteers, and so they expect to be paid. What happens when those paychecks dry up is the critical question. Perhaps an equally important question is what happens when Venezuelan soldiers think that they are about to dry up, because you do not want to spend the next month working if you do not believe there will be a paycheck at the end of it. This may be the Trump administration's broader political military strategy in Venezuela. Remember, the United States does not have a large enough deployment in the region to initiate a traditional ground invasion. So maybe you starve the Venezuelan government, get a few key players in the military to turn on Maduro, and then win the conflict by default. Second, how will the Venezuelan public respond? A depression is about to hit their country. one whose cause will immediately go away once Maduro is gone from power. Maduro is not a popular leader inside of Venezuela. By all reputable independent accounts, he lost his last election and only remains in power because of fraudulent returns. No doubt that he will use the crisis as an opportunity to trigger a rally round the flag effect. But rallies only work insofar as the public has some sort of latent trust in the leader to begin with, which is not the case here. Still, there is a big difference between failing to answer the rallying call and actively trying to overthrow the leader. For now, all eyes are on Washington. Trump is making a primetime address tonight, ostensibly about all of his accomplishments over the last 11 months. Will it turn into making the case to the American people for war with Venezuela and one final ultimatum to Maduro? We will soon find out. Meanwhile, if you want to know how we got here, I have just created a playlist about the Venezuelan crisis. Hey, you know the world is always in a good place when I am making new playlists. Click on one of the videos on the screen to learn more. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.